Usually when you travel or move to a new country, the culture shock is it's highly visible, like it's tangible.
Right, yeah. You can literally point at it.
Exactly. You step off the plane, and the architecture is different. The food smells completely new to you. The traffic is flowing on the other side of the road.
It's all structural. You can see the new rules right there in front of you, painted on the pavement.
Right. You can say, okay, that's different. I need to look left instead of right before crossing.
Right.
But then, and this is where it gets wild, you step into the world of human connection.
Yes. The unwritten stuff.
Specifically, you step into the world of romance and dating. And suddenly, all those helpful street signs, they completely disappear.
Yeah.
You're just navigating this massive, complex matrix where the rules aren't written down anywhere.
But everyone around you just seems to have been born with the instruction manual, right?
Exactly. And if you don't know the unwritten rules, you don't just get a little lost. You can end up accidentally offending someone, completely misreading a relationship, or just feeling entirely isolated.
It's the absolute definition of flying blind because, romantic norms just aren't universal human constants.
No, they really aren't.
What is considered perfectly polite or normal in one culture might be utterly baffling or even deeply invasive in another. We always assume love is this universal language, but the mechanics of how we actually get to love, they are hyper-local.
So true. And that is exactly why we're here today. To you, our listener, whether you're an international professional trying to decipher, mixed signals from a colleague you grabbed coffee with, or a student surviving the social ecosystem of a U.S. university.
Or just someone endlessly fascinated by cultural anthropology.
Right. Welcome. We know you want to understand the system without feeling totally overwhelmed by a million conflicting opinions. So today, we're going to serve as your definitive survival guide to the American romantic landscape.
And we have some incredible source material for this, don't we?
We really do.
Yeah.
We are pulling from an incredibly detailed transcript produced by the Learning English podcast. It systematically breaks down American dating and relationship culture.
It's essentially a cultural decoder ring.
It is. We are going to unpack every hidden expectation, every bizarre vocabulary word, and every unwritten rule it brings to light. Okay, let's unpack this.
I am really looking forward to this exploration, and I think it's crucial to set our baseline right at the top. As we navigate these rules, our goal today is purely educational.
Purely educational, no judgment.
Exactly. We're synthesizing the what's and the why of American dating without ranking anything. Different cultures have vastly different approaches, and we aren't here to declare one superior. We are simply handing you the facts so you can make informed choices.
I love that. So let's start at the very beginning of the timeline. Before we get into the psychology, we have to talk about logistics, like how do people actually meet?
Right, the sourcing of partners.
Because historically, Americans met the way most of the world meets, right? Through mutual friends at a university, maybe at a religious institution, or through family setups.
It was heavily localized.
Yeah.
Very community-driven.
But today, the landscape has just completely transformed. Technology hasn't just entered the chat. It's taken over the steering wheel entirely.
The statistics in the source material are pretty wild.
They are. The data shows that 30 to 40% of new relationships in America now begin online. And if you look at adults under 30, it's approaching 50% or more.
Half of all modern romantic relationships start on a screen.
It's a staggering behavioral shift.
It really is. We are talking about fundamentally rewiring how human beings select mates, and it all happened in the span of what? Roughly a decade?
Just about, yeah.
But what's truly fascinating here isn't just the sheer volume of online dating. It's how the variety of the app ecosystem directly reflects core American cultural values.
You mean how fragmented it is?
Exactly. You don't just have one state-sponsored way to date online. You have this hyper-fragmented, highly commercialized market catering to every single specific human desire.
Let's break down that ecosystem, because to an outsider, it just looks like a wall of brightly colored icons on an app store.
It really does.
So you have Tinder, which is the absolute behemoth. It introduced the swipe right to like, swipe left to pass interface.
It practically gamified human attraction.
It did. It turned dating into something you do with your thumb while, waiting in line for a coffee.
Right. Tinder established the modern baseline. It prioritized these rapid, visually driven, split-second judgments. But then the market immediately splintered to address the flaws in that Tinder model.
Oh, like Bumble.
Exactly. Bumble uses the exact same swiping mechanic, but it intentionally altered the social power dynamic. On Bumble, if a man and a woman match, the man actually cannot send the first message.
The woman has to initiate it, right?
Yes, within 24 hours or a match just disappears entirely. It was designed specifically to reduce the overwhelming flood of unsolicited messages that women were receiving on other platforms.
Which is honestly a brilliant structural fix. And then there's Hinge, which markets itself with this incredibly clever, almost paradoxical slogan.
The dating app designed to be deleted.
Yes, designed to be deleted. The interface actually forces you to answer specific quirky prompts, like, my most irrational fear is, or I'm looking for someone who...
So you're forced to engage with someone's personality, not just a grid of heavily filtered photos.
Exactly. It's supposedly for people who are exhausted by the swiping game and want a serious commitment.
And the stratification just continues. You have legacy platforms like Match.com and eHarmony, which lean heavily into complex algorithms and are marketed almost exclusively toward marriage.
And then there's Coffee Meets Bagel.
Right, which takes the exact opposite approach of Tinder's infinite scroll. It intentionally limits your daily matches to a very small number to, force you into a more thoughtful selection process.
And we cannot forget the niche, community-specific apps. If you're a minority or looking for a very specific shared background in a massive country like the US, there really is an app for that.
JDate for Jewish singles, Salam Swipe for Muslim singles, BLK for Black singles.
And for the LGBTQ+ community, apps like Grendery for gay men and H.R.R. for queer women. And those aren't just dating apps. Historically, they've served as foundational digital platforms for community building and safety.
All of this app diversity brings us to a massive cultural divergence that we really need to highlight for our listener.
The individualist versus collectivist mindset.
Precisely. In many parts of the world, South Asia, the Middle East, parts of East Asia and Africa, romantic relationships are heavily facilitated by families, matchmakers, and communities.
Finding a partner is viewed as a collective effort, a merging of two families.
But in America, romance is an intensely, fiercely individual pursuit.
I always think about it like music. It's like curating a highly personalized, algorithmically driven Spotify playlist versus, just listening to whatever the local radio station decides to broadcast to the whole town.
Oh, I like that. That's a great analogy.
The radio is community driven. Everyone hears the same song. But Americans want infinite options. They want total control over the exact genre, the tempo, the mood, and the lyrics of their romantic life.
They want to be the sole DJ.
Exactly. They want to be the sole DJ.
And that's why the American dating app ecosystem thrives. It's the ultimate expression of hyper-individualism. The very idea that your parents or your extended family would choose your lifelong partner is, for the vast majority of Americans, viewed as an infringement on personal liberty.
It's almost offensive to the American sensibility.
Right. App dating feeds the American belief in personalization, individual agency, and the core idea that you alone are the architect of your destiny.
But wait, let me push back on this a little, or at least explore the downside here. Because if you are the sole DJ and you have access to a literal Spotify-sized library of 50 million potential partners...
Doesn't that infinite choice actually become a trap?
Yes. If there is always a potentially better match just one swipe away, how do you ever actually stop swiping and define what a relationship is?
You've just identified the central paradox of modern American romance. The illusion of infinite choice creates a profound paralysis.
Because you're always wondering what else is out there.
Exactly. When everyone has access to a limitless pool of potential partners, the barrier to entry for a first date is incredibly low, but the barrier to actual commitment becomes astronomically high.
Which leads directly into the sheer ambiguity of early-stage American dating.
Oh man, this is where the culture shock really hits hard for newcomers. The dizzying, utterly confusing ambiguity.
It really is. Because if you come from a more traditional or collectivist background, the word dating implies a linear path.
Right. You meet someone, you mutually agree, you like each other, you go out, you're courting, and you're steadily walking down a straight road toward a serious commitment or marriage.
But in America, dating is not a road. It's a massive, fuzzy umbrella term.
It's an exploratory phase. And this leads to perhaps the most jarring revelation for international listeners.
Prepare yourself.
Before a very explicit sit-down conversation about exclusivity occurs, it is completely acceptable, entirely normal, and structurally expected in American culture for both people to be dating multiple other people simultaneously.
This breaks people's brains. I mean, you could literally be going out for drinks with person A on Tuesday, getting coffee with person B on Thursday, and going to a movie movie with person C on Saturday.
And you are not considered a cheater.
No. You aren't being deceitful. You aren't a villain in a soap opera. It's just, well, a normal week of American dating.
To an outsider, it looks chaotic, highly transactional, or even deeply disloyal. But if we examine the underlying psychological framework from the sources, dating multiple people simultaneously is viewed by Americans as a highly rational, healthy, and efficient way to explore your options.
The logic is entirely market-driven.
Exactly. How can you possibly know if someone is the absolute best long-term match for your highly individualized life if you don't fully explore the marketplace?
It's treated like doing your due diligence before a major investment. I mean, you wouldn't buy the very first house you walk in without checking out the rest of the neighborhood, right?
That's the exact mindset. It prevents premature attachment to the wrong person. However, while this non-exclusive exploratory phase is happening, the two of you still need to communicate.
And the primary medium for that communication early on is almost never a phone call. It is texting.
And the unwritten rules of texting in American dating are an absolute psychological minefield.
Minefield is putting it lightly. It's practically a full-time job. You're no longer just communicating information, you're engaging in a high-stakes analysis of micro-behaviors.
Every little detail matters.
Yeah, the timing of when you send a text carries enormous social weight. It dictates your perceived value.
Let's break down the taxonomy of response times from the source material because they really function as a subtle language of power and interest.
Okay, picture this. You go on a date, it goes well. You text them the next afternoon. If they respond within a few hours, that is the golden sweet spot.
Because it communicates interest without desperation.
Exactly. It says, I'm interested in you. I saw your message, but I also have a fulfilling career, hobbies, and a life outside of my phone.
It demonstrates emotional regulation.
Right. But what if they respond within 2 minutes? Every single time. The moment you hit send, those 3 little typing bubbles immediately pop up.
In many cultures, that's just polite. It means they are attentive.
Right. But in America, early in dating, it risks making you look incredibly overeager, desperate, or like you have absolutely nothing else going on in your life.
Conversely, if you stretch the timeline out, like if you take more than 24 hours to respond to a simple message without any preamble like, sorry, work has been insane today, you are actively signaling disinterest.
You're communicating that this person is at the absolute bottom of your priority list.
And then there is the most brutal, universally dreaded outcome of all.
Oh no, being left on read.
Yes. This is when your messaging app provides a digital receipt. You can literally see the word read and the exact timestamp of when they opened your message. And then days go by, no response. That is a passive rejection delivered with cold, hard, timestamp evidence.
And the microanalysis doesn't even stop at timing, does it?
Not at all. It extends to punctuation, capitalization, and emoji usage.
This part always gets me. If someone usually sends long, detailed texts with exclamation points, and suddenly they reply to a question with a single word and a period.
Like, sure, with a period.
Yes. That period is not viewed as proper grammar. It is interpreted as a weapon. It's read as passive-aggressive, cold, or angry.
I know, it sounds intense.
I have to stop and push back on this because as I'm saying it out loud to you, our listener, it sounds completely exhausting. Doesn't this strip the joy and the natural romance out of the human experience?
Many people feel that way, yes.
Sitting there, staring at a glowing rectangle, calculating the exact number of minutes you need to wait so you appear, interested but not desperate, It turns a budding romance into a highly strategic, incredibly stressful game of chess.
It absolutely is a game of chess, and it is exhausting. The vast majority of Americans complain bitterly about this phase. It's a major source of modern anxiety.
So why do we do it?
Well, what's fascinating here is why the culture developed this way. When the cultural norm is that neither of you is exclusive and you know the other person might be texting 3 other people, this hyperanalysis is a defense mechanism.
A defense mechanism against what?
Against rejection. It's an attempt to gauge the other person's level of investment without having to be vulnerable and ask them directly.
Oh, wow.
If I can decode your interest level from how fast you text, I don't have to risk the embarrassment of saying, I really like you, do you like me?
That makes so much sense. It's a shield against vulnerability. So to actually move this chess piece forward, to break out of this exhausting digital matrix and resolve the ambiguity, you have to eventually meet in the real world.
Which brings us to the high stakes, yet strangely low investment environment of the American first date.
The first date gauntlet. And the rules here have shifted dramatically over the past couple of decades.
The trend has moved sharply away from formal, high-investment encounters toward extreme, almost clinical casualness.
If you watch old American movies, a first date was a guy showing up at a door with flowers, picking a woman up, and taking her to a formal, multi-course sit-down dinner.
Today, that is largely dead.
Completely dead.
Yeah.
If you suggest a 3-course dinner for a first date with a stranger from the internet, it might actually be seen as too intense.
Right. Today, the undisputed king of the first date is the coffee date, or maybe a casual afternoon lunch, or a quick drink at a local bar. We're talking 30 to 60 minutes, tops.
Once again, we have to look at the underlying mechanism. Why the coffee date?
Well, in a culture of infinite choice and app-based matching, you are frequently meeting total strangers. You don't have the context of having known them in a college class for 3 months.
Right, you have no baseline.
So if you commit to a 2-hour expensive dinner and you realize within the first 4 minutes that they are rude, or you have absolutely zero physical chemistry, you are trapped.
You are held hostage by the appetizers.
Exactly. A 30-minute coffee provides a socially acceptable immediate exit strategy. If it's terrible, you finish your latte, say, "It was great to meet you, I have a meeting to get to," and you leave.
And if it's wonderful, you can always extend the date and go for a walk.
The coffee date is simply an efficiency mechanism.
It's just a vibe check.
Yeah.
You're sitting across from them trying to answer 2 very simple baseline questions.
Mm-hmm.
Do I fundamentally enjoy their presence?
Mm-hmm.
And do I want to see them for a second time?
But even in that simple 30-minute window, there are massive cultural tripwires.
Oh, absolutely. And the biggest one usually arrives right at the end of the date. The bill. Who pays on an American first date?
This is a highly contested transitional space in American culture right now, because traditional historical gender norms are actively colliding with modern egalitarian values.
It's super messy.
Traditionally, the rigid expectation was that the man pays for everything. And in many regions of the U.S. or within certain traditional communities, that expectation firmly remains. If the man doesn't pay, he's viewed as cheap or ungentlemanly.
Right. But on the flip side, many modern women, particularly in progressive urban areas, strongly prefer to split the bill on a first date.
Yeah. They do this intentionally to avoid any implied obligation.
Which is so important to highlight. There is an unfortunate history of some people believing that paying for a meal entitles them to physical affection later. Splitting the check establishes an immediate equal power dynamic. It says, we are 2 independent adults having coffee.
So how does an international listener navigate this without causing offense? The source material provides a universally applicable diplomatic strategy.
What we call the reach and read method. I love this because it is so incredibly actionable for you listening at home. Walk us through it.
When the server places the check on the table, regardless of your gender, you actively reach for your wallet or purse. You make a genuine motion to contribute and verbally offer to split the bill. You say, "Let's split this."
That is the reach.
Then you read their reaction. If your date immediately puts their hand up, insists on treating you, and says, "No, I've got this," you graciously accept.
You don't fight them for it.
Exactly. You don't argue. You smile, say, "Thank you so much, I really appreciate it," and let them pay. If they say, "Sure, splitting sounds good," you happily hand over your card.
It perfectly threads the needle between being generous and respecting autonomy. And the general modern etiquette rule layered on top of that is, if you are the one who explicitly asked the other person out and picked the venue, you should be fully prepared to offer to pay for the whole thing.
Precisely. Now, after the bill is settled, you step outside and you face the final hurdle of the vibe check, physical affection. How do you say goodbye?
And the answer is, it varies wildly. It could be a warm hug, it could be a brief kiss on the lips or cheek, or honestly, it could literally just be a handshake and a polite wave.
The immense variability is the point. There is absolutely no universal script for how a first date must end.
So what's the skill needed there?
The crucial foundational skill in American dating is the ability to read nonverbal signals in real time and respect boundaries instantly.
Give us some examples of those signals.
If someone maintains deep eye contact, lingers, and leans their body toward you, they are likely signaling interest in a kiss or a hug. If they angle their shoulders away from you, step back, look at their phone, or formally offer a hand to shake it, they are drawing a firm boundary.
And that boundary must be respected with a smile, zero pressure, and zero questions asked.
Yeah.
No trying to push past it.
Absolutely.
So while you're sitting there drinking that coffee, avoiding a bad goodbye, what are you actually supposed to be talking about? The cultural guide categorizes first date conversation into safe zones and taboo zones.
Safe topics are exactly what you'd expect. Your career, your passions, travel stories, favorite foods, movies you've watched, standard getting to know you material.
But the taboos are really revealing. On an American first date, it is generally considered a major faux pas to talk extensively about your ex-partners, to ask about or reveal your exact salary, to launch into heavy, polarizing political debates, to unpack deep mental health trauma, or to aggressively lay out your strict timeline for getting married and having children.
It's a lot of things to avoid.
This is so fascinating to me because there's a contradiction here. Globally, Americans are known as a very friendly, outgoing people who are incredibly willing to share personal details with total strangers.
That's the stereotype, yes.
An American will tell you their life story while standing in line at the grocery store. So why are they suddenly so closed off on a date?
Well, it's an illusion of openness. Americans do love to share, but they heavily compartmentalize what they share based on the context. On a first date, the goal is to evaluate potential, not to take on baggage.
They want vulnerability,
Yeah.
but they only want the fun, light, highly curated version of vulnerability.
Right. They want to know you're deeply passionate about rock climbing or rescuing dogs. They want to know you have an inner life.
But they absolutely do not want the heavy emotional burden of your childhood trauma or your messy divorce before they've even decided if they want a second date with you. It's too much, too soon.
It violates the unwritten rule of progressive emotional investment. Now, let's assume you navigate the coffee date perfectly. The check was handled smoothly, the conversation was light but engaging, and the goodbye was respectful.
You progress to date 2, date 3, date 4, maybe date 5. You're spending significant time together.
Eventually, this casual exploratory safety net has to be removed.
The ambiguity has to end. You cannot stay in the vibe check phase forever. And that brings us to what might be the most terrifying high-stakes acronym in American romance.
The DTR.
The DTR. Define the relationship. This is the pivotal, highly explicit conversation where you transition out of the gray area. You move from we are hanging out and I might be texting other people to we are an exclusive, committed couple.
And we really have to hammer this point home for the listener because it is the source of so much heartbreak and confusion.
What's the rule?
Exclusivity is never assumed in America. It must be explicitly stated out loud.
I cannot emphasize this enough to you. You could be going on dates for 3 solid months. You could be deeply physically intimate. You could be spending every single weekend together, going to farmers markets and cooking dinners.
All the trappings of a relationship.
Exactly. But if you have not explicitly sat down, looked each other in the eye, and had the DTR conversation where you mutually agree to be exclusive, the cultural default assumption is that you are both still single, legally and socially, and you are entirely free to see and sleep with other people.
This just blows the minds of so many people who come from cultures where deep intimacy automatically equals commitment. It feels like a betrayal.
It really does. I like to think of it like the corporate world. Imagine you've been showing up to an office for 3 months. You have a desk, you're doing the work, you're chatting with colleagues by the water cooler, you're attending the meetings. In your heart, you feel like an employee.
But you aren't one yet.
Right. In the American dating system, unless you sit down with HR and both of you sign the actual employment contract detailing your title and benefits, you are just a freelancer. And the company is totally allowed to be interviewing other freelancers. The DTR is that contract negotiation. It is the moment you ask for health benefits and pay time off.
That corporate analogy actually tracked perfectly with the American legalistic approach to agreements. In the U.S., verbal, explicit consent is required to change your status in almost every area of life, including romance. You cannot rely on implied assumptions.
So what does a typical DTR conversation actually sound like?
It requires an immense amount of vulnerability. It might sound something like this. I've really enjoyed the last few months with you. I just want to be transparent. I'm not seeing anyone else. I've deleted my dating apps, and I would really like us to be exclusive. Where is your head at?
You are laying your cards on the table and risking rejection.
You are. And interestingly, even when you have that brave DTR conversation and become officially boyfriend and girlfriend, that directness does not immediately extend to saying the phrase, I love you.
Oh, man. The cultural anxiety around dropping the L-bomb is massive.
Saying I love you is viewed as a monumental psychological milestone. It signifies a depth of attachment that goes far beyond exclusivity. In American culture, this typically does not happen until many months into a committed, exclusive relationship.
If you look at someone on a second or third date and passionately declare, I love you, they will not think it's deeply romantic like in a Shakespeare play. They will think you are unhinged. They will run for the hills.
Because it violates the pacing, it would be perceived as love bombing, a manipulative behavior we'll dissect shortly.
The pacing is everything.
And that pacing also applies to another major post-DTR milestone, meeting the parents. Here again, the American context shifts significantly away from global norms.
Right. In many collectivist cultures, meeting the parents is about seeking decisive, authoritative approval. The parents are the gatekeepers. If the parents say no, the relationship is over. Period.
But in America, meeting the parents, while certainly a sign that the relationship has reached a serious long-term phase, is primarily about building rapport and integrating lives. It is an introduction, not an audition.
But what if the parents hate the new partner?
If American parents intensely dislike their child's new partner, it will undoubtedly cause stress, friction, and family tension. But the core cultural belief is that the individual adult child's choice ultimately overrides parental disapproval. The parents do not hold veto power over the romance.
Because at the end of the day, the fundamental unit of American society isn't the family, it's the individual.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it leads us to a fascinating psychological concept that is foundational to how Americans view healthy love: codependency.
Yes. In American psychology and mainstream relationship culture, codependency is a highly negative, almost clinical term.
It describes a dynamic where two people are excessively unhealthily reliant on each other, emotionally, psychologically, or even logistically, to function in daily life.
We've all heard the classic romantic movie line, right? You complete me. In American therapy culture today, that line is actually a massive red flag.
A huge red flag.
The American ideal of a healthy relationship is absolutely not two broken halves coming together to make one whole person. It is two fully complete, fully independent, highly functioning individuals who consciously choose to walk side by side on the same path.
The preservation of autonomy is paramount. This means that maintaining your own friends, your own separate hobbies, and your own life outside of the relationship isn't just permitted, it is demanded as proof of psychological health.
If you start dating someone and you immediately abandon all your old friends, quit your hobbies, and spend 100% of your free time with your new partner, Americans view that as a dangerous loss of identity.
It's suffocating. It is a stark contrast to many collectivist cultures, where the ultimate goal of romance is a complete and total merging of lives, where the we completely subsumes the I.
In America, the we exists, but the I must vigorously defend its borders.
Always.
So because preserving the I is so important, and because that DTR contract signing conversation is treated with such terrifying heavy gravity, Americans have done something incredibly creative.
Or incredibly confusing, depending on how you look at it.
True. They have invented an insanely granular, highly specific vocabulary to describe all the spaces between being totally single and being married. They created a million different micro-labels just so they can avoid making a hard commitment. Welcome to the taxonomy of modern romance.
It really is a dating dictionary, but we have to ask why this proliferation of labels exists. It is a direct psychological response to the anxiety of commitment.
How does naming it help?
By categorizing the exact, precise level of intimacy, people believe they can control their emotional investment and shield themselves from the devastation of a full breakup.
Let's run through these statuses for the listener. Because you are listening to this and you are trying to date an American. You need to know exactly what rung of the ladder you're standing on.
Okay, let's start at the bottom.
First, the baseline level. Talking. If someone says, oh, we're just talking, it means you are texting back and forth, maybe flirting on Instagram, but you might not have even met in person yet. It's level 0. No physical contact, no real investment.
Then you upgrade to seeing each other.
This means you have been on a few dates. There is clear mutual interest, maybe some physical affection, but absolutely zero exclusivity. You are just exploring.
Next is casually dating. You are going out regularly, but with the explicit spoken understanding that nobody is looking for anything serious or long-term. It's light and fun.
Then we cross the threshold. Exclusively dating. You have the DPR. You've agreed not to see other people, but you might still feel weird using the heavy boyfriend or partner labels.
And finally, the top of the mountain. In a relationship, you are official. You use the heavy labels, you've met the friends, you might go to family events together.
That is the linear progression. But the taxonomy gets infinitely more complex and, frankly, more toxic when people actively try to live in the gray areas outside that progression. Take FWB, Friends with Benefits.
Oh boy. the FWB.
This is an arrangement where two people who consider themselves platonic friends decide to engage in ongoing physical intimacy without any romantic commitment, expectations, or emotional entanglements.
The theory, heavily promoted in pop culture, is that it's just casual, mutually beneficial fun.
But the reality is almost always a disaster, right? Because human beings are not robots. You cannot continually share deep physical intimacy with someone you already like and respect as a friend and not eventually have your brain release oxytocin and form an emotional attachment. Someone always catches feelings, and then the friendship is ruined.
Precisely. The biological reality of human attachment rarely aligns with the clinical detachment required to maintain a true FWB scenario long term. And then there's the most infamous gray area label of all.
I know what you're going to say.
The situationship.
The absolute bane of modern American dating. A situationship is a nightmare. It is a dynamic where you have literally all the traits, actions, and routines of a committed relationship. You text good morning every day, you are physically intimate, you go on dates, you support each other through hard days at work, you might even keep a toothbrush at their apartment. But one or both people adamantly refuse to put a formal label on it.
You're acting exactly like a married couple, but technically, legally, you are just hanging out.
It makes no sense.
The situationship is a fascinating, if destructive, modern defense mechanism. By stubbornly refusing the label of relationship, individuals believe they are maintaining their beloved autonomy and shielding themselves from accountability.
What's the subconscious logic there?
The logic is, if we don't call it a relationship, then you can't have expectations of me. And if it's not a real relationship, then we can't formally break up. And if we don't break up, I don't have to experience the trauma of failure or rejection.
Wow.
It is a psychological illusion. The pain when a situationship ends is often worse than a formal breakup because you don't even feel like you have the right to grieve. You weren't officially together, so why are you crying?
It's the ultimate embodiment of the classic chaotic Facebook status.
Yeah.
It's complicated. It's all the work of a relationship with absolutely none of the security. Oh, and while we are talking about labels, we have to mention cuffing season. I find this concept so funny and deeply revealing.
It is a highly seasonal behavioral trend.
Right. Cuffing season runs roughly from October to February. As soon as the weather gets cold, the days get short, and the major American holidays start hitting. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, Valentine's Day. Single Americans suddenly panic.
They do. They rush to find a temporary partner just so they don't have to be alone during the winter.
They want to be cuffed, like handcuffed or tied down, just for the dark months. And then conveniently, when spring arrives in March and everyone wants to go out and party, these seasonal relationships suddenly dissolve.
While it sounds trivial, it highlights how much immense social pressure surrounds the American holiday season. Being single and attending a family Thanksgiving table where your aunts and uncles are constantly asking, "So, are you seeing anyone yet?" can be deeply socially uncomfortable.
So it's an escape hatch.
Entering a short-term relationship during cuffing season is a pragmatic sociological solution to avoid family scrutiny and seasonal depression.
Now, I want to pivot slightly and ask you, our listener, a very specific question. Have you ever in your life caught the ick?
Ah, the ick. This is a highly specific, deeply irrational, and highly viral cultural phenomenon that perfectly captures the anxiety of modern dating.
The ick is when you are dating someone and you are really into them. You think they're gorgeous, smart, funny, and then suddenly they do something incredibly minor, inconsequential, and a wave of intense physical repulsion washes over you.
The attraction doesn't just fade, it evaporates instantly.
And you can never, ever look at them romantically again. And the triggers for the ick are famously absurd. It's not like catching them lying. It's things like you see them running to catch a bus, but their backpack is bouncing weirdly.
Or they try to push a door that clearly says pull.
Or they're singing along to a song in the car and they get the lyrics wrong with way too much confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Or they chase a ping pong ball across a room. Just tiny moments of human awkwardness that completely destroy the sexual tension forever. I marvel at how a massive emotional connection can be obliterated by how someone chews their soup.
Well, let's differentiate here. If your ick is that they are deeply rude to a waiter, or they chew with their mouth open and spit food everywhere, that is not irrational. That is a valid character assessment regarding empathy and basic manners.
True.
But the truly irrational triggers, the bouncing backpack, pushing a pull door, those speak to the hypercritical nature of modern app dating. Because when you exist in a system where you believe you have infinite options, where thousands of flawless curated profiles are waiting on your phone, You subconsciously become terrified of making the wrong choice.
So you start looking for problems.
You are constantly scanning your current partner for flaws, looking for a reason, any reason to disqualify them so you can get back to the safety of the infinite pool. The ick is your brain manufacturing a disqualifier. It's a defense mechanism against intimacy. If they are imperfect, I don't have to commit to them.
That is profound. We are literally using their awkwardness as an excuse to run away. Which brings us to the broader, more serious categorization of behavior. Red flags versus green flags. This is the language of relationship safety.
Red flags are genuine warning signs of toxic behavior, extreme jealousy, trying to control who you talk to, constant dishonesty, or anger management issues. Green flags are positive, healthy indicators, emotional maturity, a willingness to apologize, active listening, and consistent communication.
And the American dating mantra regarding red flags is deeply indebted to the legendary poet and writer Maya Angelou. Her quote, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time," is cited constantly in modern relationship advice.
American dating psychology heavily emphasizes trusting your intuition. If you see a major red flag early on and they scream at a barista, you are culturally encouraged to walk away immediately.
The idea that you can stay and fix or change a toxic partner with your love is heavily discouraged in modern American discourse.
It's seen as a recipe for disaster.
And unfortunately, this massive vocabulary of avoidance, the situationships, catching the ick, constantly scanning for red flags, it doesn't just stop at labeling things in our own heads. It bleeds out into how Americans actually treat each other when they want out of an interaction. The digital interface of dating apps has stripped away so much humanity that it has created an entire spectrum of truly toxic, cowardly behaviors.
Let's shine a light on the dark side of digital romance.
It's pretty dark.
To understand these behaviors, we have to understand the medium. The smartphone screen acts as an empathy buffer. When the person you are dating is primarily accessed through an app, it creates a psychological distance that significantly lowers the barrier for bad behavior.
You aren't looking into their eyes, you're looking at pixels.
People begin to be treated less like complex, feeling human beings and more like disposable consumer goods. If a product doesn't work out, you throw it away.
And the most famous, universally experienced manifestation of this is, of course, ghosting.
Yes. Ghosting is when someone you have been dating, or at least talking to regularly, simply vanishes. There is no text, no explanation, no argument, no breakup conversation. They just stop responding entirely.
They block your number, or they just let your messages sit in the void. They become a ghost.
It is highly criticized. Everyone says they hate it. Everyone agrees it's terrible. And yet, statistically, almost everyone seems to do it at some point because the apps make it so incredibly easy.
It's an issue of social consequence, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly. The anonymity of the app ecosystem means there are zero repercussions for bad behavior. Think about the historical model. If you dated someone you met through your tight-knit friend group or at your church, and you just ignored them to break up with them, there would be massive social fallout.
Your friends would call you out. You would have to see that person at the next birthday party and feel the awkwardness. You couldn't escape the consequences of your cruelty.
Precisely. But if you ghost a total stranger you met on Tinder who lives 3 neighborhoods away and doesn't know any of your friends, there are zero real-world consequences. It is the path of least emotional resistance. You avoid the deeply uncomfortable, stressful conversation of saying, I'm just not that into you.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, though. Is ghosting always a sign of cowardice or emotional immaturity? What if a woman goes on a date with a guy and the guy is intensely aggressive, refuses to take no for an answer, or makes her feel physically unsafe? Doesn't she have the right to just block him and disappear? Isn't ghosting a valid safety mechanism in that scenario?
That is a vital distinction, and it absolutely is.
Yeah.
In situations where there is a threat of verbal abuse, stalking, or physical danger, ghosting is not cowardice. It is a necessary self-preservation tactic. You owe no one an explanation if they make you feel unsafe.
Good. I wanted to make sure we said that.
However, the vast majority of ghosting happens not out of fear for safety, but out of fear of awkwardness. It happens because people don't want to feel like the bad guy by rejecting someone nice who just wasn't a good fit.
Here's where I want to speak directly to you, the listener, right now. Because if you spend any time dating in America, you will probably be ghosted. It hurts. It leaves you with zero closure and a million questions. But please, do not take it personally.
It's not about you.
Ghosting, in a safe scenario, is a reflection of the other person's lack of emotional maturity and their inability to handle conflict. It is not a flaw in you. It is actually valuable information. It tells you that this person lacked the basic communication skills required to maintain a healthy, long-term relationship anyway. The trash took itself out.
That is the healthiest way to frame it. And unfortunately, ghosting is just the tip of the iceberg. The digital age has spawned an entire glossary of manipulation.
What else is there?
There is breadcrumbing. This is when someone has no intention of actually committing to you or even meeting up for a date, but they send you sporadic, low-effort messages, a meme here, a thinking of you text there.
Just a few crumbs of attention to keep you on the hook, providing them with validation whenever they feel bored or lonely. It's exhausting.
And similar to that is benching. This is exactly what it sounds like in a sports context. They are keeping you on the bench as a backup option. They like you enough to keep you around, but they are actively pursuing their primary target. If their main relationship fails, they can pull you off the bench.
Then there are the actively, deeply manipulative behaviors. We alluded to love bombing earlier. This is incredibly dangerous. It occurs at the very beginning of a dynamic where someone overwhelmingly floods you with extreme affection, expensive gifts, constant communication, and grand declarations of love or soulmate status within days or weeks of meeting.
Which sounds amazing at first. You think, wow, I finally found the one. This is a fairy tale.
It feels incredibly flattering, but it is an illusion. Love bombing is frequently a conscious or subconscious control tactic used by narcissistic or abusive individuals. The goal is to create rapid, dizzying dependency and blind trust.
Once you are emotionally locked in and dependent on their validation, the mask slips, the affection is withdrawn, and the true controlling or abusive behavior begins. They use the early perfect phase to trap you.
And once you are trapped, they might use gaslighting. This is a term pulled from an old play and movie, and it means manipulating someone so thoroughly and consistently that the victim actually begins to question their own memory, their own perception, or their own sanity.
Like, you know for a fact your partner yelled at you last night, but they say calmly, I never raised my voice. You're remembering it wrong. You always get hysterical like this. They rewrite reality to avoid accountability.
Add to this gauntlet, catfishing, which is using entirely fake photos or a completely fabricated identity to lure someone into a digital relationship, often for financial scamming or emotional validation.
And finally, the slow fade. This is the coward's alternative to ghosting. Instead of vanishing all at once, they just gradually take longer and longer to reply. Their texts get shorter, they're always too busy to meet up.
They slowly withdraw all energy until the connection eventually starves to death, hoping you will be the one to finally pull the plug so they don't have to.
It is a terrifying gauntlet of emotional avoidance.
So, considering all this digital manipulation, passive-aggressive texting, and fear of vulnerability, what is the antidote? According to modern American relationship culture, the ultimate antidote is radical, explicit transparency. You have to use your words. And this demand for clear, explicit communication is realized most intensely in the American approach to physical intimacy and consent.
This is a critical section of our discussion because cultural differences here can be incredibly stark. As impartial guides to this matrix, it is essential we lay out the American baseline clearly without prescribing a moral absolute, but rather explaining the reality on the ground.
Let's start with the behavioral data. What are Americans actually doing? The mainstream norm in the United States is that premarital physical intimacy is extremely common. The data indicates that approximately 95% of Americans engage in premarital intimacy at some point in their lives. In mainstream secular culture, it is not broadly stigmatized to have had multiple partners before marriage.
That is the macro-level view. However, the United States is geographically vast and culturally highly diverse. While premarital intimacy is the statistical majority, there are massive, deeply rooted communities, often based on religious convictions, cultural traditions, or strong personal values, where abstinence until marriage or waiting for a profound emotional commitment before intimacy is the absolute standard.
Both of these realities coexist within the American borders.
And the critical, practical takeaway for any newcomer navigating dating in America is this absolute rule. There is zero obligation ever for intimacy at any stage of the dating process. Not on the first date, not on the 10th date, not because they bought you an expensive dinner. Your bodily autonomy and your boundaries are entirely your own.
But regardless of when intimacy happens, the absolute foundational bedrock of American dating today is the concept of consent.
Consent has undergone a massive structural, cultural evolution over the past decade, heavily accelerated and clarified by the Me Too movement. Historically, the cultural and legal standard was often summarized as no means no. In that old paradigm, if someone didn't actively fight back or verbally say the word no, their consent was often assumed or implied.
That paradigm has been completely dismantled in modern discourse.
Right. The new standard, which is taught in universities and legally enforced, is yes means yes. It requires affirmative, enthusiastic consent. The mere absence of a no is absolutely not a yes. Silence is not a yes. Passivity is not a yes.
Exactly. Modern consent relies on 4 non-negotiable pillars. First, it must be voluntary. It must be freely given, without any coercion, guilt-tripping, or pressure. Second, it must be specific. Agreeing to one physical act does not constitute blanket consent for all physical acts.
Third, it is ongoing. You check in with your partner. And fourth, and perhaps most importantly, it is fully reversible.
That reversible part is so key to understand. You can change your mind at any absolute moment, even if you said yes 5 minutes ago, even if clothes are off, even if things have already started. If you say stop, the action must cease immediately.
It's absolute.
I like to compare modern American consent to a digital subscription rather than a lifetime unbreakable contract. You actively have to hit the opt-in button. You might only subscribe to the basic tier of features, and you don't have to upgrade to the premium tier. And most importantly, you have the absolute right to hit cancel subscription at any literal second. And the service has to stop delivering immediately. No questions asked, no complaints.
That digital subscription analogy works perfectly to illustrate the ongoing, active nature of consent. And there is a vital legal and moral note we must highlight regarding alcohol. In American legal and cultural standards, severe intoxication fundamentally compromises a person's cognitive ability to give genuine consent.
If someone is heavily impaired by drugs or alcohol, they cannot legally or morally consent, even if they are saying yes.
In American culture today, prioritizing clear consent is not viewed as a mood killer or an annoying legalistic hurdle. It is viewed as the absolute non-negotiable baseline of respect for another human being's autonomy.
And this intense cultural demand for explicit transparency and respect doesn't just stop at physical boundaries. As a relationship survives the early app dating phase, gets past the DTR, and deepens into something truly serious, that transparency becomes mandatory for logistical boundaries and heavily for financial boundaries.
The mechanics of building a partnership. Let's transition from the emotional to the practical. The baseline of a successful long-term dynamic starts with fundamental etiquette. The etiquette rules are simple but rigid, and they set the baseline for respect.
Let's run through a rapid-fire etiquette guide. First, punctuality is huge in America. Time is money, and time is respect. Arriving 5 minutes early to a date is ideal. If you're going to be 5 minutes late, you send a text. Being more than 15 minutes late without any communication is considered deeply disrespectful. It tells the other person your time is more valuable than theirs.
Phone usage is another major deal breaker. If you are sitting at a table with a date and you pull out your phone to scroll Instagram or text your friends while they are trying to speak to you, you are overtly communicating that the screen is more engaging than they are. Keep the phone in your pocket.
The dress code for early dates is typically what we call smart casual. You want to show you put in effort, clean clothes, good hygiene, maybe a nice button-down shirt or a nice blouse, without looking like you are attending a royal gala or trying way too hard. And regarding follow-up communication, there used to be this old sitcom trope called the 3-day rule. Have you heard of this?
The idea that you must wait exactly 3 days after a date to call the person to ensure you maintain an aura of mystery and avoid looking desperate.
Yes. It was everywhere in the 90s and 2000s. The transcript makes it clear. The 3-day rule is completely, entirely dead. Do not do it. In the era of instant communication, if you wait 3 days to text someone, they will assume you ghosted them and they will have already moved on. The modern etiquette is to send a simple, polite text within a few hours of the date ending, like, hey, got home safe, had a really great time tonight.
But as you move past basic etiquette into serious long-term commitment, the most significant logistical hurdle appears, and it is the topic that causes the most friction: money. The data states bluntly that financial disagreements are consistently a top cause of relationship conflicts, stress, and ultimately divorce in America.
Because money in America is not just paper currency. It is a deeply loaded symbol. It represents your values, your priorities, your stability, and your level of personal responsibility. In many cultures globally, financial details are considered deeply, fiercely private. You might not even know exactly how much your spouse makes. It's kept hidden. But in America, as a relationship heads toward marriage, financial compatibility is viewed as being just as critical, if not more critical, than romantic compatibility.
We have to understand the American economic landscape to understand why. America does not have the massive, state-sponsored social safety nets that exist in some European nations. Healthcare is largely tied to employment and can be ruinously expensive. Higher education often requires taking on massive 5-figure or 6-figure student loan debts. Therefore, financial security is directly tied to basic survival and quality of life.
Which means financial transparency isn't just greedy, it's necessary. The transcript explicitly states that before a couple moves in together, and certainly before they get engaged, they are expected to lay absolutely all their financial cards on the table. You have to disclose your exact annual income. You have to disclose your debt, every penny of those student loans, every credit card balance, car loans. You even have to reveal your credit score.
A credit score, for those unfamiliar, is a 3-digit number calculated by financial institutions that grades your reliability in paying back debts. It dictates whether you can buy a house, rent a nice apartment, or get a car. For an international listener, the idea of revealing this number to a romantic partner can feel incredibly jarring, almost invasive.
It feels like showing someone your medical records.
But in the American context, discovering hidden debt or secret financial accounts after you are married is viewed as a profound betrayal of trust. It is financial infidelity. Transparency is mandatory because when you marry someone, you often marry their debt.
I mean, think about that for a second. Let me ask the listener. Could you imagine taking out a piece of paper and showing your 3-digit credit score, your financial report card, to the person you are passionately in love with? It highlights this deeply pragmatic, almost starkly business-like undercurrent that runs beneath the surface of American romance. You aren't just merging your hearts and souls, you are literally merging your liabilities and assets.
And that pragmatic merging of daily life is most visible in the statistics around cohabitation. The data notes that approximately 70% of American couples now live together before getting married. Historically, living together before marriage was heavily stigmatized. Today, it is widely viewed by the majority of the population as a necessary, practical test run.
You have to see if you can actually survive sharing a bathroom. You need to know if they leave their wet towels on the floor, or if they refuse to do the dishes before you sign a legally binding marriage certificate.
It is evaluating compatibility in the mundane, unromantic, day-to-day realities of domestic life.
So you take all these rigid, highly specific American expectations, the exhausting texting rules, the terrifying DTR conversation, the intense financial transparency, the cohabitation test run, and then you introduce entirely different cultural backgrounds or non-traditional dynamics into the mix. The complexity doesn't just add up, it multiplies exponentially. Let's look at what happens when worlds collide in the melting pot: intercultural, LGBTQ+, and family dynamics.
America is profoundly structurally diverse, and the dating landscape naturally reflects that reality. According to the data, approximately 19% of new marriages in the U.S. cross racial or ethnic lines. That is nearly 1 in 5 marriages, a significant and steadily growing number over the past few decades.
But intercultural dating requires navigating way, way more than just two individuals figuring out if their personalities click. You are navigating two entirely different communication styles, vastly different family dynamics, different religious expectations, and often completely different lived experiences with society itself.
And this raises a deeply poignant question, particularly for immigrants or the children of immigrants who are navigating the U.S. dating scene. How do you balance the heavy traditional expectations of your home culture and your family with the hyper-individualistic realities of the American dating market you are currently living in?
The source transcript addresses this tension beautifully, and it's a reality for millions of Americans. Let's say you are a young professional. Your parents back in your home country fully expect you to enter an arranged marriage within your specific community, because that is how it has been done for centuries. But you are currently living in Chicago, swiping on Hinge, looking for an independent connection. Or maybe your family has strict, immovable religious boundaries about who you are allowed to date, but you've fallen deeply in love with an American from a totally secular background. The emotional weight of feeling caught between honoring your family duty and pursuing your personal desire is immense. It can tear people apart.
It requires immense psychological resilience. The frameworks provided for navigating this are highly practical and focus on gradual integration. First, you must deeply know your own values before trying to please everyone else. You have to decide what is non-negotiable for you. Second, communicate with your family gradually. Dropping massive, unexpected bombshells about a partner who violates their expectations usually backfires. You have to lay the groundwork over time. Third, actively seek out a community of others who are navigating the exact same cross-cultural tension. You are not the only one walking this tightrope. And finally, find ways to honor both your heritage and your autonomy. It does not always have to be a binary choice between your family and your partner.
And on the flip side of that equation, if you are the American partner dating someone from a different culture, the expectations are high. The transcript notes that an American partner who is actively willing to learn a few phrases of your native language, who enthusiastically wants to try your family's traditional food, who genuinely respects and participates in your cultural traditions, that is considered the ultimate green flag. It shows they aren't just trying to date the assimilated, Americanized version of you, they are choosing to partner with all of you, including your history.
True partnership requires curiosity. Now, the diversity of American dating also encompasses the vibrant LGBTQ+ community. The landscape here shifted fundamentally with the watershed moment of the 2015 Obergefell v. Hodges Supreme Court decision,
Which legalized same-sex marriage nationwide across all 50 states.
Exactly. Before that decision, the legal landscape was a patchwork of varying state laws, creating immense instability. Today, LGBTQ+ dating and marriage are highly visible, legally protected at the federal level, heavily facilitated by specific dating apps, and deeply integrated into mainstream American culture and media. However, while the legal battle for marriage equality was won, the lived reality of dating on apps requires everyone, regardless of orientation, to maintain a baseline of personal safety.
The digital world can be dangerous. The guide lays out safety basics that are absolutely non-negotiable when meeting strangers from the internet. Always meet in a well-lit public place for a first date. Never go to a stranger's house or let them pick you up in their car. Set up a safety call with a trusted friend. Tell them where you are going, who you're meeting, and agree to text them at a specific time so they know you are okay. Arrange your own transportation so you are never reliant on your date to get home. Limit your alcohol intake so your judgment isn't impaired. And utilize video chats like FaceTime before meeting in person to verify they are actually the person in their photos and not a catfish.
Safety is the prerequisite for romance. You cannot be vulnerable if you're feeling physically threatened. And we want to amplify a crucial resource. If you ever feel unsafe, or if you find yourself in a dynamic that feels controlling or abusive, the National Domestic Violence Hotline in the U.S. is 1-800-799-7233. Help is always available.
That is so important. Safety first, always. Because when you do feel safe and you navigate the intercultural family tension and you survive the app gauntlet, when a relationship thrives through all of that, it eventually leads to the biggest structural events in American culture.
We are entering the territory of the big milestones. Weddings, single parenting, navigating age gaps, long-distance relationships, and on the flip side of the coin, breakups and divorce. Let's start with the pinnacle event, the massive cultural and economic institution that is the American wedding.
It is an absolute behemoth of an industry. It begins with the engagement, which traditionally involves the man getting down on one knee and presenting a diamond ring. But we have to talk about the diamond thing because it blows my mind every single time I hear it. The cultural expectation that an engagement ring must be a diamond and that a man should spend 2 or 3 months of his salary on it, that is not an ancient human tradition.
Not at all. As the historical data points out, the diamond engagement ring tradition is largely an artificial construct. It is the result of a phenomenally successful, highly aggressive marketing campaign launched by the De Beers Diamond Cartel in the 1930s. They literally manufactured a cultural norm out of thin air to sell shiny rocks.
A marketing campaign literally shaped the deepest romantic behavior of an entire nation. And the staggering costs absolutely do not stop at the ring. The average American wedding today, according to the data, costs anywhere between $30,000 and $35,000. Some are much more. It takes anywhere from 6 to 24 months of intense logistical work just to plan a one-day party.
It is a massive financial undertaking. But if we analyze why it is so expensive, it perfectly mirrors the hyper-individualistic nature of the dating process we've been discussing. The modern American wedding is not just a legal ceremony. It is heavily marketed as a highly personalized, curated theatrical expression of the couple's unique identity. You are paying for custom napkins, specific floral arrangements, and professional photographers to capture your specific brand of love.
And if you are invited as a guest to one of these massive productions, there are strict rules. You are expected to bring a gift. Usually the couple creates a registry, which is a pre-selected list of items they want for their house, so you just buy off the list. If you decide to give cash instead, the social expectation is to give enough to cover the cost of your plate at the dinner, which usually means $100 to $300 per person. And RSVPs.
Strictly legally mandatory.
Yes. You cannot just casually show up on the day of the wedding if you didn't RSVP. And you absolutely cannot just forget to show up if you said you were coming. They have provided exact head counts to the caterer for that $35,000 party, and if you mess up the seating chart, the bride might literally hunt you down. But honestly, as we talk about these insane costs, I have to step in and remind the listener. While the average is $35,000, going down to your local courthouse, signing a piece of paper, and getting married for $50 is a perfectly valid, wonderful, and increasingly popular alternative that many Americans choose. You do not have to bankrupt yourself to prove you are in love.
Indeed. The performative aspect is optional, even if the industry tries to tell you otherwise. But not all romantic milestones are about the beginning of a first marriage. The landscape is far more complex than that. The data dives into the realities of dating with existing heavy complexities. For instance, the reality of single parenting.
This is a huge, very common reality. Roughly 23% of children in the U.S. live in single-parent households. That means millions of single parents are actively navigating the dating market. And the rules here are very strict regarding boundaries. First, dating as a single parent requires early disclosure. You cannot hide the fact that you have children from a new partner. It must be on your profile or brought up on the very first date.
However, while disclosure must be early, introduction must be heavily delayed. The standard psychological and cultural advice is to wait at least 6 to 12 months of being in a serious, exclusive relationship before you even consider introducing your new partner to your children.
Why so long?
To protect the children's emotional stability. Children attach easily. If you introduce them to every person you date for a few weeks, you subject them to a revolving door of attachments and abandonments, which creates deep psychological insecurity. The relationship must be proven stable before the children are involved.
That makes total sense. Then there's the navigation of age gaps. American culture applies severe, intense social scrutiny to relationships with significant age differences, particularly if there is any hint of an inherent power dynamic, like a boss dating a young employee or a professor dating a student.
The concern is rooted in whether both partners are on equal footing regarding emotional maturity, financial independence, and life experience. Can a 20-year-old truly give uncoerced consent to a 50-year-old millionaire? Or is the power dynamic inherently manipulative?
And to navigate this, the culture actually invented a literal math equation. The transcript mentions this informal cultural heuristic that people use to judge their comfort level with an age gap. Half your age plus 7.
It is a fascinating piece of folk wisdom.
It's wild. So if you are 40 years old, half your age is 20, plus 7 is 27. So 27 is the youngest socially acceptable age you could date without your friends raising their eyebrows at you. If you are 50, half is 25, plus 7 is 32. I am mildly scandalized that there is an algebra equation for social judgment, but people really do use it as a baseline.
It's a crude formula, but it effectively scales the acceptable age gap as people get older, reflecting the reality that a 10-year age gap matters a lot more at age 20 than it does at age 60. Similarly complex are long-distance relationships, or LDRs.
The LDRs are brutal. To survive them, the culture dictates you must have an explicit end date, a known date when the distance will permanently close. You cannot just do long distance forever with no plan. And for international couples, closing that distance involves navigating terrifying legal hurdles, most notably the K-1 fiancé visa.
The K-1 visa process is an intense bureaucratic gauntlet.
It's known in pop culture as the 90-day fiancé visa. If an American citizen wants to bring their foreign fiancé to the U.S. to live, they apply for this visa. Once the foreign partner steps foot on U.S. soil, a literal legal countdown clock begins. They have exactly 90 days to officially get married. If they don't sign the papers by day 90, the foreign partner is legally required to leave the country. Talk about pressure. You have 90 days to figure out if you actually want to spend the rest of your life with this person while simultaneously planning a wedding and navigating immigration paperwork.
It forces a timeline on emotional development, which often acts as a massive pressure cooker for the relationship. But of course, not all relationships, whether local or long distance, survive the pressure. We must address how things end: breakups and divorce.
The golden unwritten rule for American breakups is that the method of the breakup must exactly match the depth and duration of the relationship.
Correct. The exit strategy must be proportional to the investment.
So if you've been on one or two casual dates, sending a polite, firm text message saying, "I had a nice time, but I don't see a romantic connection," is totally acceptable. If you've been dating for a few weeks or a month, a text is too cold, a phone call is required. But if you are in a long-term, committed, exclusive relationship, you must, absolutely must, break up in person. Breaking up with a partner of 2 years via text message is considered universally cowardly and deeply traumatizing.
It denies the other person the dignity of a final conversation. And post-breakup, there is a modern etiquette rule regarding social media. The transcript explicitly warns against vague booking.
Yes. Vague booking is when you post cryptic, passive-aggressive, overly dramatic quotes or lyrics on your social media that are clearly aimed at your ex, but you don't name them. Like posting, "Funny how people show their true colors when things get hard." It is considered incredibly immature and toxic. Keep your heartbreak off the public timeline. But what if the relationship wasn't just dating? What if it was a marriage that needs to end? The data provides clear insight into American divorce.
Historically, the narrative was that half of all American marriages end in divorce. That statistic is actually outdated. The divorce rate is currently dropping and sits around 25% to 30% for college-educated first marriages. However, while the rate is dropping, the cultural stigma surrounding divorce has almost entirely evaporated.
This is a massive shift. In many cultures around the world, and in America 60 years ago, the prevailing belief was that staying together no matter what, enduring the misery for the sake of the kids or for religious reasons, was the highest moral virtue. Divorce was a shameful failure. In modern America, the cultural consensus has flipped. The belief now is that staying in a highly toxic, abusive, or deeply unhappy marriage is actually far worse for the children and for your own soul than splitting up. Divorce is widely accepted as a highly painful, but sometimes completely necessary and healthy reset button.
It is the ultimate assertion of the right to pursue individual happiness. Though asserting that right is extremely expensive. A simple, uncontested divorce where both parties agree on everything might cost $500 in filing fees. But a bitter, contested legal battle over assets and child custody can easily cost $20,000, $50,000, or more in legal fees.
Given the devastating emotional toll of a breakup and the potentially ruinous financial stakes of a divorce, it makes total sense that modern daters are desperately looking for a safety net. They don't want to make a mistake. And they aren't looking to matchmakers, astrologers, or luck to save them anymore. They are looking to science.
Which brings us to our final and perhaps most structurally revealing topic. Section 11, the psychology of success and the future of dating. The modern American dating landscape has become incredibly intellectualized. Daters are heavily utilizing peer-reviewed psychological research to navigate their romantic choices.
Yeah, it's like everyone suddenly got a minor in psychology. The absolute standout example of this, cited constantly in the culture, is the work of Dr. John Gottman.
Dr. Gottman is a renowned psychological researcher who essentially created a love lab in Seattle. He would put couples in an apartment, film them arguing or discussing their day, and track their physiological responses: heart rate, blood pressure, sweat. From this data, he claimed he could predict with over 90% accuracy whether a couple would eventually divorce.
That is basically a superpower. And from that research, he identified what he dramatically calls the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse for relationships. These are the 4 communication styles that signal doom. They are criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. Let's make these concrete.
Criticism is attacking your partner's core character rather than their behavior. Instead of saying, "I'm frustrated you didn't take out the trash," criticism says, "You never help out. You are incredibly selfish and lazy."
Defensiveness is the natural reaction to criticism. It's playing the victim and refusing to take any accountability. "Well, I wouldn't have forgotten the trash if you weren't constantly nagging me all day."
Stonewalling is when one partner simply shuts down, withdraws from the interaction, and refuses to engage at all. They might literally turn away, look at their phone, or leave the room mid-argument, leaving the other partner feeling abandoned.
And finally, the deadliest of all, contempt. Gottman found that contempt is the #1 predictor of relationship failure. Contempt is expressing superiority or disgust toward your partner. It's mocking them, calling them names, or rolling your eyes at them. It treats them like they are beneath you. Once contempt enters a relationship, the respect is gone, and the relationship is essentially rotting from the inside out.
On the flip side of the 4 horsemen, Gottman's research found the golden ratio for successful couples, the 5-to-1 ratio. For every one negative interaction or conflict a couple has, they must have at least 5 positive interactions, a shared joke, a compliment, a moment of physical affection to maintain a healthy emotional bank account.
This intense reliance on psychological frameworks has fueled a much broader therapy culture in America. Going to premarital counseling or couples therapy is no longer seen as a desperate, secret emergency intervention for a failing marriage. It is openly celebrated as proactive, healthy maintenance. It's like taking your car in for an oil change so the engine doesn't explode later. Saying I am in therapy or showing that you are willing to do the work on your own mental health is currently considered a massive, highly attractive green flag.
Emotional intelligence is becoming the most valued currency in the dating market, and nothing embodies this highly intellectualized, therapy-driven approach more than attachment theory. The widespread popularity of books like Attach has essentially handed Americans a brand new vocabulary to diagnose their entire dating history.
If you spend 10 minutes on American Dating TikTok or talk to any 20-something, you will hear about attachment styles. It is the new astrological sign. Attachment theory categorizes how people subconsciously respond to intimacy and perceive threats in a relationship, usually based on how they were raised. Let's walk through the 4 styles.
The baseline is secure attachment. These individuals are comfortable with both deep intimacy and maintaining their independence. They don't panic when their partner needs space, and they aren't afraid to lean on their partner for support. They communicate clearly and trust easily.
That's the absolute goal. That is peace. But then you have anxious attachment. This is the person who craves extreme, constant closeness. They live in a perpetual fear of abandonment. They tend to over-communicate and need constant reassurance. If they send a text and their partner doesn't reply for 3 hours, their brain immediately spirals into, they hate me, they are losing interest, I am going to be abandoned.
Directly opposite to that is avoidant attachment. These individuals fiercely value their independence, often at the expense of connection. They associate deep intimacy with a loss of freedom, so they often feel suffocated when a relationship starts getting truly serious. They tend to subconsciously withdraw, create emotional distance, or suddenly find flaws in their partner just as things are getting good.
And finally, the most difficult one, disorganized attachment. This is a chaotic, painful mix of both anxious and avoidant traits. They desperately crave intimacy and love, but they are simultaneously terrified of it, often due to past trauma, so they pull you in close and then push you away when you get too close.
So why is this taxonomy so prevalent? Why does it matter to our listener?
I am so glad you asked. I want to ask you, listener, what does this all mean for you? Why should you care about this psychological jargon? Because by identifying your own attachment style and observing the style of the people you are dating, you can finally decode the matrix. You stop taking things so personally. You realize that the guy who ghosted you didn't leave because you weren't pretty enough. He left because his avoidant attachment was triggered by your closeness. You can figure out exactly why certain people trigger massive spinning anxiety in your chest and why other people give you a sense of deep, boring, wonderful peace.
Exactly. It fundamentally shifts the entire focus of dating. It moves the goalpost from simply finding the right person out there to actively doing the internal work of being the right person. And this introspection aligns with the broader trends the data identifies for the future of American dating. There is a noticeable cultural exhaustion with endless swiping, leading to a move toward intentional dating. People are delaying marriage. The average age is now pushing 30 for men and 28 for women because they are prioritizing financial stability, career establishment, and deep self-awareness before they ever sign that DTR contract.
We have covered an absolutely unbelievable amount of ground today on this deep dive. We started with the dizzying, split-second, thumb-swiping judgments of the app ecosystem. We navigated the exhausting, highly calculated chess match of texting response times and the exact etiquette of the 30-minute coffee date vibe check.
We unpacked the heavy legalistic gravity of the DTR conversation, the complex and often painful taxonomy of situationships, and the dark, cowardly digital behaviors of ghosting, breadcrumbing, and gaslighting. We also reinforced the foundational, non-negotiable absolute of enthusiastic, reversible consent.
We looked at the intense financial transparency required to merge lives, the beautiful but highly complex realities of intercultural melting pots and LGBTQ+ dating. We examined the massive financial stakes of $35,000 weddings and the painful realities of divorce. And we ended by exploring how modern Americans are essentially trying to hack their own brains with attachment theory to make this whole chaotic system work.
It is a massive, highly contradictory, deeply complex cultural system. But beneath all the specialized vocabulary, the therapy jargon, and the glowing digital interfaces, the fundamental pursuit remains exactly the same as it is anywhere else on Earth. The universal human desire for deep, enduring connection.
And that brings us to the end of our journey today. But as always, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. We have just spent the last hour dissecting a modern dating culture that is absolutely obsessed with endless options. A culture driven by algorithms, focused on curating the perfect profile on a screen and analyzing the punctuation of text messages like they are ancient sacred hieroglyphs.
So perhaps the most provocative, the most rebellious, and ultimately the most successful thing you can possibly do in the modern American dating landscape is to actively reject the fundamental premise of infinite choice. Stop swiping endlessly, forever looking for the elusive, flawless perfection promised by the next profile. Find one single person who displays good enough green flags, put the glowing phone down, and intentionally choose to build the romance offline, face-to-face, with all the awkwardness and beauty that entails.
That completely reorients how I look at it. Because at the end of the day, you cannot learn to navigate the invisible rules of the Matrix just by reading the code. Eventually, you have to step off the sidewalk, take someone's hand, and actually start walking through the city together. Take care of yourselves out there in the dating wild, trust your gut, and we will see you on the next deep dive.